Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we want to talk about this. On the side of the screen there, we want to talk about HexOS. Remember a few months ago we made a video about some NAS software that was in development from some ex-unRAID employees that was backed to the tune of I think $250,000 by Linus from Linus Tech Tips. This is it. This is the HexOS, designed to be a user-friendly, kind of complete, no-skill level OS for your own DIY NAS, challenging the arena right now that one would argue is occupied heavily by the likes of TrueNAS and unRAID. And over on the WAN show, around about a day or so, obviously I'm not going to play this too much on this video, good old YouTube rules, but they go into a lot of detail there, talking, more about what we can expect from this software, more that we're hoping to see, and ultimately the target demographic. The big takeaway here is it is being built on TrueNAS scale. Again, I'll link to this video in the description. Obviously, all of the details will be there, and a lot of the information for today's video comes from this, but it's not the only source for today's information. Also, I will highlight that throughout the course of this video that we have an article linked below where we've updated several times with information that we've garnered over the last few months, and there'll be a dedicated video just on this, because there's just a lot more to add to this about HexOS. But as a quick reminder, Jonathan Panoza, or John P, a number of you may know, was one of the two previous employees of the unRAID, Lime Technology project there, and had formed off to create their own operating system for DIY NAS, challenging the complexity that many first-time users face when building their own NAS from scratch and want to utilize effectively open source, or at least open source element based software for a NAS. Now, again, pretty much all this looks very well organized there. He does highlight in a recent post over on LinkedIn, or Wanker's Facebook, we all hate it, about that launch of this product along with Eric Schlutz. Jonathan and Eric Schlutz there have pretty much started it there, along with presumably backing an investment from other players as well. Originally, we sort of thought this would be built on an unRAID base, and I was kind of surprised to hear about the TrueNAS scale base, and we'll circle back around to that in a moment. But if you head over to the Trademark and Patents Office, you can find out that several different logos and stuff have all been applied there within the June date. And then one from last year, SCheck, presumably their organisation, kind of parent company to the whole thing, all kind of registered there, and I'm sure there's going to be more information appearing over time. But there's also, as discussed earlier on, they've opened up that website there. There's going to be a beta in Q3, so July to September of this year. Again, let's be realistic. I don't like this website. I'm not the target audience for this website. I get that, the audience they are going for. This is very much the way I would market this if I was trying to target it towards simplified storage. People that want to spend their time making movies, watching movies, and basically letting the data do the job and not have to worry about parity data, RAID functionality, remote access, networking IPs, etc. There's even a few screens there of the software itself are at the bottom that we'll talk about in a moment. But the big takeaway there, as mentioned, is it's powered by TrueNAS. Now, there is the question of just how much of TrueNAS is in this. Is this TrueNAS Lite or TrueNAS Zero, or like scale diet? Who knows? But at the moment, it just, from what we could see from the few screens that have been shown thus far, it just looks like the same TrueNAS login front end, but a much more simplified UI moving forward. And the three screens the page here reveals to us shows one, the health monitor there for our system. We'll come back to this tab in just a moment. Then we've got another tab there outlining the storage, and one of the things that was touched on by Linus in the WAN show is recommended storage profiles. Now, whenever we set up NASes, myself and Eddie, and helping users, and indeed those of that watched our videos and then went on to set up their systems, very rarely will a system recommend a configuration. They'll put the drives out there and they'll give you the option to select the RAID, but only on a very few occasions, such as in some Acer Store systems, when you go for quick installs, can you have a system that will create one disk of RAID parity, create a BTRFS file system, and do it all at a single click, or at the very least say this is what we're going to do. And what they're proposing here seems to be they'll assess your storage array of hard drives or SSDs and then go, this is what we recommend, but you can disregard it if you like. it's, I'll be interested to see how that's presented, but nonetheless, that's an interesting way to go for a storage novice. The last tab here, again, is what seems to be proposed to be the overall dash. Now, we don't know if this is just some vector mock-up or the real thing. We'll know more in the beta when it rolls out. Now, I imagine it will approach this. We've got those applications there. We'll come back to the subject of apps later on. We've got a little bit of system resources there, heavily simplified, unsurprisingly. And then across the whole thing, just basic icon identification for each of those services you are running there. But the things I want to return back to here on the left, one, VMs. Now, I understand they're trying to go for a simplified market. Simplifying VM deployment, I will be blown away if they can simplify VM deployment. Sure, container stuff has been simplified. unRAID did an incredible job of container, just easy one-click container deployment there. But I would say VM deployment in a simplified capacity is going to be tremendously hard to do. The other thing I wanted to highlight, again, I said I'd return to this page here. We see the networking protocol there, the NICs. We see a GPU. We see a CPU breakdown there. We see the memory. We've got the storage there for the main storage. The RAID storage there and SSD arrays. I'm not seeing any indication here that the OS is on its own OS dedicated drive, or that OS is, again, much like an unRAID, where it can be bootloaded from a USB drive there. So I'll be interested to see when people are DIYing whether they're going to have to assign an OS drive, or is this going to be something like a Synology or a QNAP where the operating system actually lives on the storage array? Again, unlikely because of the TrueNAS scale base, but it'll be interesting to see. The other thing I want to highlight with TrueNAS there is how much of TrueNAS scale is going to be implemented here, because we almost certainly is going to be ZFS based. It would be madness to utilize TrueNAS and then immediately go, do you know what, we're going to go ext4 standard. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see if back-end intelligent caching there, the ZFS caching, how much of snapshots are going to be implemented at the user's behest, or how much of that is going to be automated in the back end so that they can really push that simplification. But when it comes to that simplification, coming back to those applications, we have to discuss that idea of one of the main hurdles that brands have faced when they've tried to go for a simplified user interface on a NAS software, and we'll go through lots of examples in a moment. One of the big hurdles they have found is towing the line between simplicity and security. Now, an example I'm picking here, and there's lots of arbitrary examples I could make, is Plex. Now, as you can see from one of those earlier images, they have got a Plex installation there running. Presumably, that's going to be a one-click app there that either is a containerized version in one shape or form, or some sort of custom-made version for this for HexOS. It's the same way when you see dedicated download. If you go to the download section of Plex, you find dedicated versions that have been tailored for different deployments there. Again, Synology, QNAP, Windows deployments, different ones like that, even different versions within operating systems. Interestingly, though, regardless of how the installation of Plex is done on this in a one-click capacity, almost like a Google Play Store methodology, I want to know how sharing of media is done. So, case in point, and again, I'm sure we'll know this more in the beta, I'm not going to say idiot user, if I am someone that is not vested in the world of learning networking, not vested in learning the world of storage, I just have a lot of media I want to dump on the NAS, and therefore I want Plex to be able to access that media. Am I just going to willy-nilly upload it, or am I going to have to upload it into preset folders? Am I going to upload it and there's already a preset intelligent back-end indexing system that knows to identify this? Now, the next step beyond that when we go into Plex is that when I need to set up my shared paths for my movies, for my music, for my photos, I want to know that I can access those folders. But in a simplified mindset, I may not know that I'm going to have to assign access privileges to those individual folders, and what are the folders that the media is in. And it's a catch-22, because you're trying to do it as simply as possible, but by oversimplifying it, you do run the risk of giving certain containerized applications too much access to your data. And this is obviously Plex, arguably a very low-level application, but it still opens up the door to inadvertent vulnerability attack vectors for an errant application that has been compromised. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that is deployed. And we haven't even really talked about off-site backups either, because chances are they're going to have cloud synchronization. It'll be completely optional. The idea is, as they've repeated several times here, it's about getting your data out of the cloud with the option, if you choose, to pop it there if you want. But I'm going to be very interested to see on these images how rsync backups, remote backups, cloud backups, even local USB backups are going to be handled. Will it be a native application or one that installed within the App Center by choice? And the other thing we have to touch on is scalability. One of the beautiful things about TrueNAS Scal, and indeed TrueNAS Core as well, is it is insanely scalable. But expanding, although on TrueNAS Core has only recently been involved in kind of native expansions of drives there in Scal, presumably it's going to be easier thanks to the Linux kernel anyway. I'm going to be very interested to see what their provisions are for scalability, adding drives later on, and how they're going to simplify that. If I've built, for example, an 8-bay system and I've popped 4 drives inside and I've got 4 empty bays, 1, am I going to be able to mix and match the drives? 2, how are you going to tell me, the user without the experience, that I can or cannot do that in the most user-friendly fashion? And also, when I am adding these new drives, are they going to simplify it that I pop this drive in and it just adds it to the array? Is it going to be the option of a hot swap? And once again, we tippy-toe on the tightrope of erring between complexity and versus ease of use there. I mean, when we talk about earlier on looking at those images, we could see in one of them they have got an SSD pool and a storage pool. So it opens the door. What about hybrid storage and combo storage? When we look at something like unRAID and its parity system and its mathematical parity system, when you're not utilizing ZFS pools, is nuanced. I'm not going to say it gives you the huge performance, but it does mean mixing and matching of drives is easier if you select the right parity disk. Again, we're erring into that complexity once again. Then you look at something like QNAP, which has its Q-tier system that allows you to merge hard drives and SSDs into single pools, and the system manages and leverages the advantages of storage versus performance in the background. Again, I am well aware that I am discussing rather complex concepts and complex architecture in a system that is targeted towards simplicity. But these things are important, and you factoring in scalability early doors and expandability, particularly on a third-party OS that people are going to install on their hardware, thinking this thing is going to have to run for 3, 5, 10, 20 years as they move between architecture. Factoring scalability and expandability on day 0 is hugely important, because retroactively trying to play with those things, whether it is the RAID functionality or the storage expandability, is not going to be easy. Next up, I want to talk about that point of an accessible user interface there, and where we are at in the industry right now, and why arguably there is definitely demand for a more tech novice user that's far more interested in the integrity and the access of their data, what they can actually get right now in 2024. Because you've got things like Synology DSM, arguably the gold standard in terms of NAS software towing a line between usability and functionality, but even that misses the mark often. You have things like QNAP, which gives you a huge amount of flexibility in what you can do and customization, but it often is its own worst enemy, because it either has too many things going on at once and doesn't limit you sometimes as a user and just goes, do what you want, oh my god, I'm going nuts. Or it gives you too many options that are presented in a very inconsistent fashion from one area of the GUI to another, leading to a very poor UX sometimes. Then you have something like unRAID, which arguably in the semi-open source scene, one could argue is probably the more user-friendly end, but it's still not that user-friendly. Anyone that's ever used the storage manager in unRAID will know that that is an area, and I was chatting to someone at unRAID just yesterday. We're doing a video with Ed Rawlings very, very soon, on a 10-point video we're working on. But that's one of the areas. Their storage setup wizard on unRAID is one of the few chinks in that armor, I would argue. And then you've got things with installation of apps being one-click installs, but only if the repository is added correctly, your storage is set up correctly. So it's a very important step there, getting the storage set up. And as user-friendly as unRAID can be, there are still those early stepping stone issues and problems that users can hit during the setup, which inevitably either lead to them screwing the whole thing up and having to start again, or building the rest of the foundations of their system, which moving forward becomes simplistic, but on an unstable footing there. Then you've got things like the Latticeworks series with the Amber Pro. Now, the Amber Pro is a very smaller selection of NAS items. If we featured it a few times before, it's available in, I think, 2 or 3 configurations, and their software is painfully user-friendly, I would argue. It breaks it down to the nuts and bolts, but the problem is it also becomes fantastically limited as well, and I made very serious comparisons between it and WD, more on them in a moment. And then you have things like Zimmer OS and Casa OS. Now, Ice Whale have been rolling out different NAS solutions. You know, the Zimmer Blade, we talked about the Zimmer Cube a while ago. They're getting even closer to a user-friendly GUI there, with, again, one-click installations, simplified storage, the whole works. And as they're going into the larger configurations with the Zimmer Cube, I would definitely tip these guys to be one of the most user-friendly NAS softwares out there. They lack a lot of the client tools for desktops, but they still have them. And I would also argue, by the way, when it comes to Zimmer and Casa OS, as good as it all sounds, they're still behind the curve in some ways. They only introduced RAID functionality to the Zimmer OS software a handful of months ago. So again, they've got the user-friendly side of things, but the fundamentals are still very much in progress with that beta software. And then, of course, you've got things like the dumpster fire that was WD's NAS OS. When you looked at the different iterations, they were targeting the user-friendly NAS user. They were targeting creating a GUI that students, hard-working professionals, family members streaming over DLNA could access. But as the competitors at Synology and QNAP and more started rolling out with more features, they kept trying to add features till eventually they were pleasing no one with a GUI that was too complicated for the novice and too limited for the experience there. And that was really a consistent thread we saw with them. So fingers crossed, what we're seeing here in this software is it's going to try to readdress the balance. Will they achieve it? I'll be staggered if they do. And all of these are just pictures. But it's not impossible. I would just be interested to see how much of the back end of TrueNAS Scale is going to be utilized and how much of that is truly passive. Now, with the beta apparently rocking out in the next few months, we have to talk a little bit about users that are in the process of building their NAS systems right now. They might have already had an OS in mind. They might have already thought about going for TrueNAS, or already going for unRAID, or already going for Zimmer, or any of those things. If with all of these different software options in the market right now, when they built the system, what they want to do is install the bloody software and start using it. Now, they might want to hold out for this beta and then try it out for a little period and go, do you know what? I'm on board with this. But there are questions people are going to need to have answers to now. And if you are watching this, HexOS, if you are watching this, John, one, again, I know you don't need to clarify the pricing model right now, and this was erred on exactly in that fashion on the WAN show there, because it's too early. The scope and the range of the product and the utility of the project by end users, you can't price these things up now. But I definitely think outlining whether this is going to be a subscription model, is it going to be 1 year versus a lifetime pass? Are they going to emulate what we see now from unRAID? unRAID recently, who have increased the price of their lifetime passes. Theirs was one of the cheapest OSs short of free operating systems I'd seen for a long time. I'm surprised it took that long for them to increase the price. But on top of that, trial periods, are you going to introduce that? These are all, I think, vital things that need to be in the first formal presentation of that software. And the next thing is support, because I get it, it's a user-friendly software, I get it, it is designed for the less technically minded, but those are the users that are going to be heavily leaning on support networks the most. Is it going to be a largely community support based model, as we've seen from TrueNAS up to this point, with elements of paid premium support and enterprise support if you choose to? Is it going to be, unlike the unRAID model, where they've got dedicated technicians who you can hire on an hourly rate to give you hands-on troubleshooting all-encompassing support there, or is it going to be a mixture of them both? Or if this is a paid option on the outset, are people going to get a commercial grade support to start with? It doesn't seem like a very large organization, and I can't imagine there's going to be tech teams on day one. So I think nailing down what support is going to be is going to be very, very important for those novice users who are thinking, well, that's a great idea. What do I do when I don't know what I'm doing? Hell, HexOS GPT. You wouldn't be the first to do it. Look at something like Unify, the whole Ubiquity series of devices there. When you look at the apps and services, and we're sort of working on some videos in the background there, they have an application that is a unified GPT that is tailored to that model. I know it's not to everyone's cup of tea, and it clearly makes disclaimers on the screen that this is an AI. It gets it wrong, but at least something, just a proof of concept of what support is going to look like. But that is really it. All the references and all the links and everything referred to in today's video should be linked in the description below, along with the articles over on NAS Comparative that we will be updating in the next 24 hours. It is a Sunday morning here. I've got stuff to do. But what do you guys think? Are you the target demo for something like this? A lot of the people that watch these videos are, turnkey NAS users. And I think those users being able to buy and build their own NAS systems, because we're seeing more and more pre-built OS-free solutions rocking out the gate, may be very interested in this. Is this for you? Let me know in the description below. But needless to say, when that beta rolls out, we will make some videos on it there, because I genuinely want to get my teeth into this. It sounds intriguing. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.